Then far away I can hear a voice in the weather house call out a name. Mr. Brolly, it's time for the rain.
Then it came, pouring from the sky, until the earth was fresh again. Then the sun, the magic in the air, the Brollys made the weather for you and me.
Harry was trying to go to sleep, but no sooner had he closed his eyes than he opened them again. Tucked up beside Harry in bed were his toys, Elephant and Hippo. Snake, as always, lay on the rug by the door, and Bird was perched on the chest of drawers. Harry stared down at his patchwork quilt. It was different from other quilts. Instead of flowery scraps of material, it was made of little embroidered pictures of rainbows, stars and planets, clouds, and great flashes of lightning in a dark and stormy sky. It had been made a long, long time ago. On the wall hung Harry's weather house. If the day was going to be fine and sunny, Mrs. Brolly came to her door. If the day was going to be wet and cloudy, Mr. Brolly came out. But of course, they never came out together, for it is impossible for a day to be both wet and dry at the same time. But what would happen if they both came out together? Wondered Harry, and he sat up and stared at the weather house. As he stared, the doors seemed to grow larger. His bed grew smaller, and he found himself at the entrance of the weather house. A light was shining from the door, through which Harry could see Mr. Brolly no longer fixed to his wooden stand, but moving freely about the room. When Harry entered the weather house, he found Mr. Brolly standing behind a curious machine. It had been made a long time ago. "Mr. Brolly, what a wonderful old machine," said Harry. "What does it do?"
"One moment, my boy, one moment," he said. "I almost have it. Just a tinkering with a screw here, and a tightening of a spring there, and..."
The machine coughed, rumbled, and then fell silent. "Mr. Brolly, what are you doing?"
"Well, Harry, I'm trying to make a special surprise for Mrs. Brolly's birthday. And I suddenly remembered the old weather machine. My grandpa made it a long time ago. It never got the weather quite right, but it made some delightful singing rainbows."
"Singing rainbows?" said Harry. "How lovely they must have been."
"Oh, I never actually made one," said Mr. Brolly. "I could never understand the instructions for doing so. Oh, imagine the joy," he said, "of being able to go outside and to point upwards and say, 'Dearest, this is for you.' And there would be a singing rainbow arching across the sky."
"Perhaps I could help you to mend it," said Harry.
"Perhaps you could, dear boy," he said. "Children have sharp eyes and nimble little fingers."
Little Cloud drifted into the room. As he entered, the lamp on the machine lit up, and a large black cloud came out of the chimney. It was playing a very loud march.
"Oh, catch it, my boy!" cried Mr. Brolly. "I can't present Mrs. Brolly with a loud black cloud for her birthday."
"Biggle!" cried the little cloud happily. He felt sure that the big cloud was his grandpa. Still playing the loud march, the big cloud floated from the window. Little Cloud followed. "Bumper!" he cried. Mrs. Brolly was sitting on the porch step with Wilkins. They were both surprised when the big black cloud and Little Cloud rained down on them.
"Brolly?"
said Mrs. Brolly.
my dear," he said, it was a surprise. Aha, yes, that's what it was. It was meant to be an early morning birthday surprise, a sort of beat the drums, sound the trumpets, it's Mrs. Brollys' birthday. You see? "No, I do not," said Mrs. Brolly. "Both Wilkins and I are very wet."
"I am, sir," said Wilkins. "I'm very wet. We flowers always sing a birthday song on our birthday." And he began to sing. "Oh, first you were a tiny seed, and then you were a flower. How sweet you were, how sweet you are, as you grew hour by hour." "Much more suitable," said Mrs. Brolly. "Now that is a nice birthday treat." Back in the control room, Harry and Mr. Brolly looked at one another.
"Let's try again," said Mr. Brolly. "We're sure to get it right this time."
He cranked the handle of the machine. Smoke puffed from the chimney, and the lamp glimmered faintly. But apart from this, nothing at all happened. The machine shook, groaned, and then fell silent.
"It's not going to make a singing rainbow," said Mr. Brolly. "It's not going to make anything, I'm afraid."
Almost immediately, the room was filled with giant bubbles. "Oh, Mr. Brolly!" cried Harry, and in the next moment, he found himself trapped inside a bubble.
"My boy!"
cried Mr. Brolly, for he too was caught. They floated out through the window and over the garden. Mrs. Brolly looked up and watched as Harry and Mr. Brolly drifted by.
"Happy birthday, dearest!"
cried Mr. Brolly, but Mrs. Brolly could hear not a word.
"Oh, sometimes that man is a complete fool," she said to Wilkins, who stood beside her in his pot. "He has never quite grown up."
But it would have been nice to have been given a special birthday surprise. "I'll sing you some more of the flowers' birthday song," said Wilkins. "Soon, ah, soon the winter comes, you wither in the pod."
"That will be quite enough," said Mrs. Brolly. "I have no intentions of withering in my pod."
Mr. Brolly and Harry were floating over the garden in their bubbles. The feeling was quite enjoyable.
"My boy," said Mr. Brolly, "perhaps we have invented a new way of travelling. It could become quite the thing. It's peaceful and very comfortable."
Harry heard none of this, of course. Then his bubble was whisked down the path which led to the winter garden. And below there now stood the leafless trees, their branches covered in snow and hung with icicles.